So whenever you export, you have to be aware of settings and what you're actually doing and stuff. First of all, I want to drag this a little bit back here just so everything is in there. Not really necessary, I think, but this is just like a common sense thing I'm doing usually. A quick side note, when we export meshes with that add-on, with the Send to Unreal add-on, right? We can then do LODs, but for some reason it doesn't like skeletal meshes LOD. Yeah. So whenever you have a rig, it doesn't like the LODs. It's pretty easy to do this manually, so don't worry about it. What I'm going to do is on the LOD 0, I'm just going to delete the LOD here so it doesn't get confused. And I'm going to hide the LOD 1 here. We're going to do this manually. Not a big deal. So now we should go to Edit, Preferences, and look for Send to Unreal. Open this up because here we have our settings. And we're going to start at the left side. Now, the path, it's pretty straightforward. It's just the path where things are going to be saved. So if we go into Unreal now, you can see I'm in a different project. This is just my project where I want my stuff in. So usually you will get this folder Untitled Category. I'm just going to create a new folder here, new folder, and I'm calling this dark_creature. And I'm going in here, and this is where I want my stuff to appear. So what I'm going to do is right click on this folder and show in Explorer. Then a Windows folder will open. And you're just going to click on here and Control-Z this path and close it. Back to Blender. Yep. And we can just paste this in here. And we have the correct path where things should appear. Quick side note, usually this works, but for some reason when I did this, it kept breaking. I think it has to do because like it doesn't find this folder. I recommend you for the beginning, just don't change it from the default. Just keep this Untitled category in there. You could also decide if you want to send it to Unreal, export it to a disk, so save it locally or both. Just stay with Send to Unreal, this is what we want. Then to export, here we have the typical export settings we usually have when we also go to File, FBX Export. So I'm just going through a few settings here. This automatic scale bone automatically scales your armature objects so they import in a scale of 1. So if you didn't do n item scale of 1, it supposedly fixes it. But this is, I wouldn't trust it, okay? So this is one thing. Then we want to export all actions. This auto stash active action is just simply when you have an action that is not pushed down, it will automatically be pushed down. I don't do this because like we should be aware of what we're pushing down and what not. So I usually never use this. Use object origin. So yeah, we're using the object origin to be the origin. Pretty logical. We want a scale of 1. Applying scale or log, this is all should stay the way it is. Apply unit should be on. Then smoothing face, usually it's on normals only, and with face we're actually exporting the normals we have. Apply modifiers I usually turn off because I want to be aware of what I'm applying and what I'm not applying. The rest here doesn't matter. Now the primary bone axis, I wanted to take a look if we go into Unreal here, and I have my other character here, and if I go to my skeleton here, I want you to take a look at my arm here really quick. So in Unreal, the bones are a little bit moved. So this bone here is basically the next one. Yeah, this is a little bit confusing for Blender people, but it's always a step further. Meaning if I select the last bone here, you can see the last bone in a row is not even existent. It's not like showing, but it's still rotating. This is a bit confusing, but yeah. What I wanted to show here is the axis. You can see how X, the red one, is pointing along the bone and Y is the secondary. So if we go back to Blender and we take a look at our skeleton here, you can see that for us, Y is pointing along the bone and X is the secondary. So what we have to do in the export settings here is change this from primary bone axis Y, this is how Blender does it, to the Unreal one. So primary X and secondary Y. We want to only export our deform bones, which we made sure are only on the last layer here. We don't want to add a leaf bone, you can just forget about this. We want to bake the animation, obviously. If we don't check this, it's not going to actually rebake everything and export it, so we need this. Key all bones, if we go with the mouth over it, you can already see. Force exporting at least one key of animation for all bones, needed with some target applications like Unreal 4, so this is definitely something we want. And for start and end key, we definitely need a start and end key, otherwise it's not going to properly loop. Sampling rate is just how many samples it takes, so basically one is going to be each frame. Here you can see in the frame, so meaning each frame will be sampled. We could probably halve this, but then it would shank it out or something. And then we can simplify it. Simplify when you go to File, Export FBX, is usually 1. 1 is a good value here. Don't know why it's by default 0 here. And that's basically all the settings we have to do here. Then we can go to import, and it's a bit of a weird naming scheme. It's basically asking us what do we want to import to Unreal. We want to import the materials. This is not like, it's basically just going to create us a material. We can do this, why not? It doesn't really matter. Textures, we don't have textures, turn this off. We want obviously to export our animations. We don't want to export the LODs. If we have this checked, but we don't actually have LODs, it's not going to export because it's looking for LODs, but we don't have LODs. You can see I deleted the LOD 0 here, so it doesn't even know it. Yeah, we don't want this. It's going to only break with skeletal meshes. Object name as root bone, this is right. So it just takes the object name and makes it and renames it. And this here is going to launch the xxerbexx import UI. You will see this in a second. And I think we're basically done here. The rest doesn't matter. And we can just move this aside. Maybe we need it. Maybe I messed something up. Can happen. And now what we're going to do is, and this is why I said I saved it earlier, because now we need to get rid of our constraints here. So we need to select all the bones in pose mode and clear constraint. Why? Because let me show you first of all. If we're now going over here, it looks like it's working. But it's only working because we have the lower ones enabled. So if we turn those lower ones off, select them, H, they're hidden, you can see it's not working because those constraints still hold them in place. So if we now clear constraint, you can see it's perfectly working the way it's intended to. And now it's going to rebake those animations and it should be working. Now we just go pose mode, object mode, we select the bond mesh and the armature and go to pipeline exports into Unreal. Right, one thing I forgot here, move the mesh to mesh. So we have to select the mesh, press M, and move it actually in the mesh collection. Same with the rig, M, and just move it in the rig collection. Now if we select both, export, send to Unreal, and we go over here to Unreal. We need to wait a second because it's a character, it might take a second. You can see Blender is loading in the background a bit. And there we go. We get this xxerbexx import. This is the thing we checked earlier. Can I open this? Yeah, this launch xxerbexx import UI. This is what we are seeing here currently. This is the xxerbexx import UI. So let's go over it. It's a skeletal mesh because it has a skeleton. We want to import the geometry and the scaling weight. Then here, skeleton. This is maybe a little bit confusing for starters. You could select another one here, but we don't want this. If we don't select one, it's going to create a new one. This is what we want. It's going to create the one we are trying to import. Yeah. You could, in theory, if you have humanoids, yeah, like my character here, if I know it's exactly, well, there's some exceptions, but if, let's say, if it's exactly the same skeleton, I could just select it and we would have less skeleton, but we could use the same, you know. Vertex color import. This is pretty important to us because we want, obviously, to have our vertex color. And this is a little bit confusing. Import a static mesh using the vertex color from the xxerbexx. Ignores the xxerbexx, overrides all color with a specific one, so replace. Replace is the right one. Replace means we are going to actually import what we want. Weird name scheme. This all shouldn't matter to us. Here, morph targets. If we wanted to import shape keys are called morph targets in Unreal, so we would need to check this. Import mesh LODs if we had LODs, but it doesn't like LODs on skeletal meshes, so we don't check this. Import normal import method compute normals. And we can change this to import normals. With that, we are actually importing the normals from our xxerbexx. While for this character, it wouldn't matter much. But for other characters where we manipulated the normals, it might be more important. So, you know, it doesn't really matter. I trust the Unreal compute normals in this case, because it's just going to smooth it out. Here we have the threshold. By the way, if you don't see some stuff, there's a little arrow in the bottom here, which you can unfold. Yeah, you can see here, this is actually pretty small, and then you can unfold it. Here we have the threshold. It's basically just asking us how much of a distance of vertices should be merged together. So basically, closer vertices are going to be merged together automatically. And you can see I have a really, really low number here. This also goes for the normals and for the UV. Just make sure you kind of have the same numbers as I have here, really low numbers, because we don't want to merge them unless they're actually at the same position. Create physics asset. You can create a physics asset. We're not going over this yet. Eventually later, if I'm going to continue the series, but keep this checked. Animations, we obviously want to import the animations. Animation length, exported time. We can keep this. This should be giving us the accurate timing result we have in Blender. Import mesh hierarchy, bone hierarchy. This should all be default. Import custom attributes. This is all should all be pretty default here. Do not import curves with only 0 values, meaning it's going to But this is related to the morph target, so it doesn't matter that much. Import translation. So if we, sometimes you have this problem from Blender to Unreal that your character is rotated 90 degrees. We could fix this here. Yeah, we could just rotate it and place it in a certain position. Yeah, miscellaneous. This should also be default, convert to scene, convert scene unit. This is all good. And we can just hit import all. Interesting. Okay. We can see here in Blender arrow thing, I just clicked on the bottom right here. It says, come on, it says unknown location. So I'm guessing the problem it has is it doesn't quite know the folder. I think this is the problem. Let's save this Ctrl+Shift+S here. Okay, so one more try. So here nothing should have changed, I hope. Blah, blah, blah. This should all be fine. Import all. And, well, some errors here. Can detect import type. No mesh found. Animation track. Interesting. It doesn't really matter much because we only need one anyway. And here it's trying to import the animations, and you just select your dark creature skeleton, which now got created, and you hit import all. So it's going to ask you for more, but it doesn't matter. You can just cancel the rest. I'm going to do this in a second why it does that. Let me just cancel all of them. And the only thing I changed is, I'm going to show you, instead of using this folder here, I used the untitled category and assets, and you can see I have it in here, and here it got created a new animation folder with our animations in here. And you can see they are working. The reason it asked me multiple times to import stuff is because it tries to grab those animations from the NLA, from the action editor, from the blend file. We only need two. We need the skeleton, which we set up in the beginning, and we need another one, which is the animation where you can just hit import, where you can just select the skeletal and then just hit import, and your animations will be in there. We don't need it from the NLA, we don't need it from the action, we don't need it from the blend file itself, we only need it one time. And yeah, I think it crashed on me because I set a different path in here. You can see this is basically, I guess the best thing is to just stay with that, and then you can copy it out of those folders. So yeah, just stay with that here. I had to close the file and redo the steps. Definitely worked now. I mean, it's good practice to redo this, right? So let's just redo this really quickly again. The first walkthrough was a good explanation, I think, but first detailed explanation, but let's redo this. I'm going to delete those, yeah. Here's the animations in there. Delete and force delete and delete and force delete. So with that, everything is out. I'm going to reopen my file. So first of all, I renamed the mesh here. I already oversaved it, and I dragged my timeline back. Those two things are already saved. Then we go to edit, preferences, send to Unreal. And we started the path. Usually I change it. I don't know why it's breaking on me here, but okay, let's just stay with the default. We go to export. Then we want to export all of the stuff, use object origin, blah, 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 scale, apply units, pretty much all the default things here. Apply modifiers can be turned off. We don't need this. Then X and Y, only deform bones, and the rest should stay the same. We go to import. We don't want to import, well, we want to import the materials, I guess. No textures, animation don't want LODs. We want to start the launch the FBX UI. And that should basically already be it. What we have to do now is select the mesh, move it to the mesh collection. Select the rig, move it to the rig collection. And then we also need to clear our constraints. So pose mode, select everything, clear constraints. Now we select both here and go to pipeline, export, send to Unreal. So first thing, we don't really change anything here. The skeleton will be created when we don't select one. Replace for the vertex color, compute normals. If you want to actually import them, you need to change this to import. Small values under threshold. Remember the arrow here if you need to open it. Then import animations. That's really the only thing we checked here. And the rest shouldn't matter to us. And we can just hit import all. Hope it's not crashing. And it gives us some errors. I wonder why it does that. And when I tested it like literally like a few minutes ago before I started recording, it didn't give me this error. But roaming, I found the scripts poses.fbx failed. But I think this might be just because we locked it. And you can already actually see we already imported those animations. So I think we don't even need, it's a bit weird sometimes. Just be aware that you only need to import the animations once. Yeah, those are all the _exp. So I'm pretty well aware those are the ones we need. a bit random, and it definitely could work a little bit more steady, but it's still the best option we have. You can try, if you're really funny, try to export it with Blender's FBX exporter, but good luck on that. Either way, we got this in here. We checked the animations. You always should check your animations. If you have a red bone here, this is because you didn't properly fix the root here, like I did here. This is the root, right? This one needs to be fixed down there, but we can see it's working pretty good. And down here at the bottom right, on the asset browser, if you don't have it, go to Windows. It's always the same with each program. If you don't have a window within our editor, you just need to go to Window and look it out here. Where is it? Asset, there it is. So now one more thing. We want to get our LOD, right? We want to have, where is it? Mesh. So we currently exported this high-res mesh here. It's LOD 0. But we also want the lower one, this one here. So to export this is actually going to be pretty easy. I wonder, can we just keep the name? We'll see. If we wanted to get this in, we wouldn't need to go back to Unreal. And we can open up here the purple one. It's called a Skeletal Mesh. And some stuff will open up here in the top right. You can change between the skeletal mesh, the animation, the physics asset, which we are going to back later. But we want to be in a mesh. And if we go to the asset details, it somewhere says LOD picker custom. By the way, you can also go to the eye and there is like a collapse all. Okay, we don't want materials, we want the LOD picker, and there's like this custom setting and this arrow. Okay, LOD 0 custom, okay. Somewhere it asks us if we want to import a LOD. Maybe under LOD settings. Yeah, LOD import base LOD. Import LOD level 1. So what we want is import LOD. You can see it's going to open up a Windows folder, which I think is really weird. I don't get why we cannot just like import it internally. Okay, now we want to get our LOD over, which is actually pretty easy because like a lot of stuff is going to automatically be fixed by Unreal because it already knows the original mesh here. So make sure you select your LOD 1, so the lower one, right? And the armature. Go to File, Export, FBX, and you can see I already have one here because I tested it. And the setting for this is just simply select only the exported object, the selected objects. Export only the selected objects. Then transform, apply units. Under geometry, we want to have the face normals. And it's basically the same settings as we had before under the preferences here. Over here. Basically the same thing. We don't want to apply modifiers. Armature, we want the X and the Y, right? I changed this. Primary X, secondary Y. And only deform bonds. We don't need to bake the animations. The animations have nothing to do with it. And we select this here and hit, or create a new one. If you don't have one, you probably don't have one. So hit export FBX. That's basically all it is. And you go back to Unreal. And in this purple window, yeah, the mesh here, back here, the purple one here, yeah, you go down where it says LOD settings, and then there it says LOD import. And you're just going to click from base LOD to import LOD level 1. You can see I already imported it, yeah. So import LOD level 1, it says for you. Window will open, you're going to select it, and it's going to work. Hope it is. It should at least. There's nothing really that can go wrong. You can see I just exported it and I'm going to hit re-import. It really shouldn't do anything else. Now, you're not going to see much, but up here in the window, it says LOD auto. And if you click on LOD 0, it will also tell you in the bottom left here, LOD 0. If you check on LOD 1, you can see the resolution gets lower and it says LOD 1 here. It tells you the screen size, the triangles, the vertices, and the vertices obviously also change with a high resolution. We get like 8 times as much. So now we want this, if we change this to LOD auto, so it changes automatically. We can take a look here at the top left, LOD 0. And if I'm holding Alt, right click, I can zoom in and out. And at some point it should switch to LOD 1. Let's just see here, right here. Look at top left, we can see when it's going from 0 to 1. I think there's a pretty good distance. It's working pretty good. But if we wanted to change this, it's a bit confusing here. Under LOD 0, we can get the screen size. So meaning It's a bit weird because this doesn't matter that much on the LOD0. But if we go down to LOD1, which we have now, we can fold this, LOD info, we can see screen size. So when should LOD1 trigger? With a screen size of 0.3. Screen size is up here. So I exactly know when it should trigger. So I'm going to zoom out and then tell you when it's going to trigger. We're at 0.6, 0.5, 0.4, and with 0.3 up here, 0.3, it's going to trigger, watch out, exactly at 0.3. And whoop, 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 whoop. Yeah, so if I would be lowering this to like say 0.1, we would still stay at LOD0 until the current screen size is 0.1. Gone. Yeah? So, but I think 0.3 is pretty reasonable for this. So 0.3. And now the LOD will change with 0.3. Close this, everything is working as expected. Control-Shift-S, and voila, we got this. And obviously we might want to control it and stuff, but more on that later. We got it imported, yay! As long as the size when you drag your skeletal mesh, the purple one, in is correct, because this is kind of the size I imagined, right? It should be relatively small, maybe it's actually a bit too small for my taste, but the size is right. And as long as the animations have the same size, yeah. Now though, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to import this creature again, because there's nothing for me to get from Blender anymore. I want to move this. So I'm going to select those things. I'm going to... You probably don't have this left thing open here. There's a little arrow here, yeah, this thing here. You can open this up. And I'm going to look for my dark creature, which I have in the content folder. So basically the one that's all the way out here, right? So I'm going to select those. And I'm going to drag this in my dark creature over here. Move here. And I'm going all the way out. And I'm going to right click on this content folder. And there is a thing that's called Fix Up Redirectory folders. You have to understand all those folders you have in Unreal here are actual folders on Windows. And while you change them in Unreal, they don't automatically change in Windows. And clicking this Fix Up Redirectory, it will fix the folders in Windows. So you have to be a little bit careful. You can see it did a little thing here. And with that, things should be fine, and we can Control-Shift-S.